Our passion reading for this evening is from the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, the 23rd chapter. Then the assembly rose and as a body brought Jesus before Pilate. They began to accuse him, saying, "We found this man inciting our nation, forbidding us to pay taxes to Caesar, and saying that he himself is the Messiah, a king." Then Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" He answered, "You say so." Then Pilate said to the chief priests and the crowds, "I find no basis for an accusation against this man." But they were insistent and said, "He stirs up the people by teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee where he began, even to this place." When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. And when he learned that he was under Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him off to Herod, who was himself in Jerusalem at that time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad, for he had been wanting to see him for a long time, because he had heard about him and was hoping to see him perform some sign. We've been looking at human nature on Sundays the last few weeks, and an ongoing theme there is how Scripture does a good job of holding up a mirror to humanity. We so often think of ourselves and others through these distorted lenses. Our stories are complex. When we think about our own stories, we think of how we've overcome so much. We've worked so hard to get where we are. And then on the other hand, when we think of others' stories, we think they're simple. We reduce them down to their demographic, right? Their birthplace, their political affiliation. We over and underestimate other people's struggles all the time and our own. So we come to these stories, whether parables from Jesus or accounts of encounters that he has, and they can strike us as strange, but upon further reflection, we find that they almost always abide by the same shared human nature. Pushing it even further, if we're honest with ourselves, we can very often find ourselves in the story exactly how we would react. And it's not always pleasant. We aren't always the hero. Pilate does as most any politician would do and as most of us would do. Jesus is brought into his midst, and when he realizes this could be a problem, it could be controversial, he deflects. He shifts the responsibility, therefore the potential blame, onto someone else. And who could be his fall guy? How about a local authority, Herod? So he sends him off, and Herod's happy to hear it because he wants to see a sign. Herod questioned Jesus at some length, but Jesus gave him no answer. The chief priests and the scribes stood by, vehemently accusing him. Even Herod, with his soldiers, treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then he put an elegant robe on him and sent him back to Pilate. That same day, Herod and Pilate became friends with each other. Before this, they had been enemies. Pilate then called together the chief priests, the leaders, and the people, and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people, and here I have examined him in your presence, and have not found this man guilty of any of your charges against him. And neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. Indeed, he has done nothing to deserve death. I will therefore have him flogged and release him." Then they all shouted out together, "Away with this fellow! Release Barabbas for us." This was a man who had been put in prison for an insurrection that had taken place in the city and for murder. Pilate, wanting to release Jesus, addressed them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why, what evil has he done? I have found in him no ground for the sentence of death. I will therefore have him flogged and then release him." But they kept urgently demanding with loud shouts that he should be crucified, and their voices prevailed. Herod and Pilate, who had been adversarial toward one another, agree on this one thing: Jesus is innocent. Luke makes a point to include this detail because a wider theme of this gospel is Jesus' innocence. Jesus, and therefore Jesus' followers, are no threat to the political establishment, and Luke wants his Gentile audience to know that. When given the chance to free Jesus, according to this custom, they instead ask for Barabbas. Bar means son of, and Abba means father. It's a bit of a wink to us that their two choices were both the son of the father. So as far as the crowd can tell, it seems there's only this one difference. Which of them is innocent and which is guilty? Who would and has chosen violence and insurrection against the empire, and who has chosen peace? The agitated masses do as people often will, and they choose violence. They'd rather see more bloodshed if it means their own interests are furthered. So Pilate gave his verdict that their demand should be granted. He released the man they asked for, the one who had been put in prison for insurrection and murder, and he handed Jesus over as they wished. As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' They will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?" 2 others also, who were criminals, were led away to be put to death with him. When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing. And the people stood by watching, but the leaders scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others. Let him save himself if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." Most of Jesus' followers have fallen away, and those who remain are beating their chests and wailing. And there's one person, just one person who helps, Simon of Cyrene. Why? Because he was forced to. You've heard of this bystander effect. We'd like to think when we see something on the news, like if I had been there, we'd jump in, right? We'd help if we had the opportunity. But often people will just fade into the crowd. If no one else is helping, why should it be me? Why should I risk it? If they're this brutal with Jesus, what would they do to me? Tyrants are vicious with a few because it scares others into not fighting back. But the only thing that keeps innocent people from being trampled over is the bravery of others. As bad as it is for Jesus, he assures them, just standing by, things are only going to get worse from there. That's a persistent message from Jesus and the prophets. Things will get worse before they get better. A day is coming when God will set all things right, but evil and chaos will ravage history before we get there. And God forgive us, because we do not know what we are doing. The soldiers also mocked Jesus, coming up and offering him sour wine and saying, "If you are the king of the Jews, save yourself." There was also an inscription over him, "This is the king of the Jews." One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." He replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, while the sun's light failed, and the curtain of the temple was torn in two. Then Jesus, crying out with a loud voice, said, "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." Having said this, he breathed his last. When the centurion saw what had taken place, he praised God and said, "Certainly this man was innocent." And when all the crowds who had gathered there for this spectacle saw what had taken place, they returned home beating their breasts. But all his acquaintances, including the women who had followed him from Galilee, stood at a distance watching these things. Earlier I mentioned, as I have a few times in the past weeks, that we might find ourselves in one place or another within these stories, even though we can say that human nature is such that everyone in the story acts in a way that's normal, right? An expected way. The same kind of ways people would probably act if it happened now, how we would act if it were us. But it's not like everyone acts the same, right? There's a lot of ways to be normal about this. Some people respond to stress by retreating inward. Others have to get out and talk about it. Some people see injustice and they despair. Others get angry. Some are numb. Occasionally, some people even take pleasure in the suffering of others. Luke closes the story of Jesus' life with 3 people showcasing 3 ways we might respond. The centurion proclaims, "Surely this man was innocent," fitting right in with what we saw before. The Gospel of Luke emphasizes Jesus' innocence. The Roman soldier knew that. So we have to ask, why would he stand idly by as an innocent man is killed? Because his faction, his team, his people, he was caught up in all this, like a listless ship moved about by changing tides. Fighting that seems impossible, so he stood by, and only in hindsight can he say the truth out loud. Only looking back does he realize how he and they should have acted differently. As Martin Luther King Jr. put it, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. No matter how it was twisted up by the Romans or the religious leaders or the frenzied mob, the murder of an innocent man undermines justice for everyone. With the body of an innocent man maybe in his arms, that's how it's often depicted in the art, the centurion knew that more than most ever will. But even before that, we've got this classic image of the two voices, like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, like a prosecuting attorney and a defense attorney sitting on each side of the judge or king. Two bandits come at Jesus from two very different angles, but they are normal human nature sort of angles. One mocks him, derides him, makes light of the situation. Some people revel in the suffering of others even if they suffer too. It's not good. It's just the way it is. His story should serve as a reminder to ourselves to check ourselves. When someone suffers, we see that on the nightly news. Do we take pleasure in it? And if so, why? Odds are, if we're honest, the reasons also are not good. Then the other bandit defends Jesus. He recognizes his own sin. He knows he deserves what he's getting, and Jesus doesn't. In a sort of deathbed confession, he says to Jesus that he's guilty, and he begs for grace. Jesus, Lord, please do not forget me. Jesus' love is so profound that the man's sins are not even a consideration, not a stumbling block, nothing at all. Jesus doesn't waver, even in his own suffering and sorry state. That confession is all it takes, and all is forgiven. God does not desire the death of sinners, but rather that we turn from our sin and live. Today, he tells him, they will be together in paradise. Now, some women who followed from Galilee are still there, as well as a few others looking on from a distance. Almost everyone else has abandoned Jesus. But these few, maybe the centurion, maybe Simon of Cyrene, they will go on to tell the story. There are many people in this story to choose from. Maybe we just tell the story and that's it for us. If we look in here and find ourselves, right? Find how we might react in this situation. And if your sense is you'd rather not be one of them, you would rather have stood up, you would have fought back, you would have come to Jesus' defense. If you'd like to think that you'd be willing to risk going to die alongside him, ask yourself, how do you react when someone innocent is victimized? Now, no one else is totally innocent, of course. So when there's a miscarriage of justice, when someone is denied their rights, when tyrants imprison or have someone killed, do we decry the authorities? Or do we look for ways to justify it? Maybe highlight that person's imperfections, like maybe they deserved it, but somehow I don't. This is the most important story in all of human history because it highlights just how broken we all are. The closest thing to a hero we find in here, the closest one we might aspire to, is a guilty bandit just because he realizes his mistakes. Sometimes, most times, the best we can do is confess our sin and beg for forgiveness. Remember me, Christ, remember me. But we must not give up. For our day of demise is not yet here. There's room for improvement. There's a chance to better ourselves. There's a chance to write this story in a new way and write yourself into it in a new way, to stand up for justice, to risk yourself for someone else, to help bring about a day when no such miscarriage of justice shall ever happen again. Write your own story. Pick up the cross. Follow Jesus.